We live in interesting times for the headlines. Hong Kong airport authorities on Tuesday suspended all check-ins, but reversed a previous statement saying that all departing flights had been cancelled as pro-democracy protesters blocked the facility.
Since 1996,
the administration of U.S. President Donald Trump announced new rules that aim to deny permanent residency and citizenship benefits to migrants who receive food stamps, Medicaid, and other public welfare. A body has been found in the hunt for a Franco-Irish teen in Malaysia, and it's likely the missing girl, according to a charity, 10 days after she disappeared from a rainforest resort. And the U.S. Health Authority, co-funding a research, says scientists were a step closer to an effective treatment for Ebola after 2 drugs in a clinical trial were found to significantly boost survival rates. I'm Alma Angeles, wherever you're watching from around the world. Thank you very much for joining us, and now to the news. We start today with in Hong Kong, where hundreds of flights were cancelled or suspended at the airport on Tuesday as pro-democracy protesters staged a second day of hugely disruptive rallies, defying warnings from the city's leader, who said they were heading down a path of no return. All check-ins were cancelled on Tuesday afternoon after thousands of protesters wearing their signature black t-shirts made barricades using luggage trolleys to prevent passengers from passing through security gates.
You know, protesting always has its reasons, but I think protesting at an airport is probably not the best way to express yourself. It causes disruption to a lot of people that may share the same opinion, may not, but certainly don't want to be kept from going to their homes. Well, now I'm tired, I'm hot, and I'm a little upset because yesterday's protests managed to disrupt my travel back to the United States, and that's not fair for me. I understand why people are upset, but that's not fair to me that these protests have now caused me to be stranded.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I was so surprised because of the demo. Yeah, but I understood. That's okay. Yeah.
I'm very sad because I have many friends in Hong Kong, so they want to change the government.
An earlier statement announcing that check-ins had been suspended said that flights were still arriving. The decision came after thousands of pro-democracy protesters flooded into the airport for the second consecutive day and blocked passengers from reaching entrances to the departure area in both terminals. The protesters streamed into Hong Kong airport and quickly transformed the arrivals hall at one of the world's busiest transport hubs into a sea of black, and many added a new accessory, eye patches or bandages, to pay tribute to a woman who suffered a serious face injury on a protest on Sunday night. The woman, who has not been identified, was reportedly hit by a beanbag round fired by police, and rumors circulated that she lost her vision. Images of blood pouring from her face as she lay on a pavement quickly went viral and featured in posters calling for demonstrations under the banner "An Eye for an Eye." Students and pro-democracy groups are planning further demonstrations this week. Meanwhile, late on Monday night, 2 Chinese state media outlets ran video showing armored personnel and troop carriers purportedly driving to Shenzhen, which borders Hong Kong. Now, even netizens have posted short clips showing green armored fighting vehicles entering a service area in a row and riding down a highway purportedly towards Shenzhen, the mainland city bordering the territory. The state-run People's Daily did not comment on the purpose of the vehicles, but noted that the People's Armed Police are in charge of handling riots, turmoil, seriously violent criminal activities, terrorist attacks, and other societal security incidents. Meanwhile, on Tuesday, the territory's chief executive, Carrie Lam, warned that violence was pushing Hong Kong in a dangerous direction, and she warned that violent protests are driving Hong Kong down a path of no return. Let's listen in.
暴力，無論係行使暴力或者縱容暴力，都會將香港推上一條不歸路，會令香港社會陷入十分焦慮同埋危險嘅境地。我相信當時聽到呢番説話嘅人士，可能都係半信半疑，或者認為有少少誇大。但係過去一個禮拜香港發生嘅情況，令我係好擔心，我哋正係出現咗呢一種危險嘅情況。
Now, Hong Kong's latest protest movement has been going on for more than 10 weeks now. The demonstrations have become violent, with both protesters and police becoming more intense. Mrs. Lam said police faced extremely difficult circumstances and were bound by rigid and stringent guidelines on the appropriate use of force. And she even dodged a question on whether she had the power to end the crisis by granting one of the key demands of the protesters to fully withdraw a now suspended bill that would allow extraditions to mainland China. Pressed on whether her hands were tied by Beijing on that issue, Mrs. Lam at one point appeared to be on the verge of tears, and she appealed for calm.
The central government is still confident that I myself, as the government of the Hong Kong SAR, together with the police force, that we are still capable of resolving this crisis.
Do you have the autonomy or not to withdraw the extradition bill,
The second point I want to make.
Could you answer that specific question?
In response to the various demands that we have heard, we have considered all factors and came up with a response that we have rehearsed time and again over the last 2 months. Thank you very much.
Do you have the autonomy or not to withdraw the extradition bill? You have not answered the question. You've evaded the question. Please, Chief Executive.
The police have very rigid and stringent guidelines in the use of appropriate force, and that requires the lowest level of force in dealing with those situations.
Mrs. Lam, tell me what is your responsibility? You're talking about the responsibility of the police and the people of Hong Kong. What is your responsibility as the leader of Hong Kong to solve this situation?
Can I continue to answer?
No, please tell me what is your responsibility as the leader of Hong Kong.
Okay, I'm
Don't talk about the police and the people. What is your responsibility?
sorry. It was not my choice to concentrate on the police, but all the questions now have been focusing on the police.
Meanwhile, in the mainland, China described the unrest in Hong Kong as a sign of terrorism emerging, as state media published a video of armored personal carriers purportedly driving towards a city bordering the territory. And Beijing slammed the violent protesters who it said had thrown petrol bombs at police officers. And then they linked them to terrorism in Hong Kong, where weeks of pro-democracy demonstrations have posed the biggest challenge to Chinese rule since the territory's 1997 British handover. Take a look.
但连日来，香港激进示威者屡屡用极其危险的工具攻击警察，已经构成严重暴力犯罪，并开始出现 恐怖主义的苗头，这是对香港法治和社会秩序的粗暴践踏。
Hong Kong police fired volleys of tear gas on Sunday at demonstrators after denying their request for permits to stage a march. And on Monday, authorities took the unprecedented step of closing the airport as thousands gathered for new protests. But Mr. Yang focused on the violent behavior of the tiny minority, which he condemned as a serious challenge to Hong Kong's prosperity and stability. The two-month crisis, which was triggered by opposition to a planned extradition law, has morphed into a wider movement for democratic reform and a halt to eroding freedoms. It is the biggest threat to Beijing's rule of the semi-autonomous southern Chinese city since its handover from Britain in 1997 and has drawn repeated criticism but no forceful actions yet from the central Chinese government. To other news now, a knife-wielding man killed one person and attempted to stab several others in a central Sydney rampage before being chased and pinned down by members of the public. Take a look. Police said a 21-year-old Sydney man named Mert Nay with a history of mental illness is believed to have killed a woman of around the same age in a residential unit before going on the rampage across the city center. New South Wales Police Commissioner said he had no known links to terror organizations, but he did have a thumb drive with details of mass casualty, white supremacist attacks in the United States and New Zealand. Mert Nay was taken into police custody about 2 p.m. local time following a citizen's arrest, in which onlookers pinned him down on the street using a milk crate and 2 chairs. One woman was taken to hospital in a stable condition with a stab wound in her back at the same time of Nay's arrest near Windward Station. About an hour later, police found the body of a woman in a block of units on Clarence Street with fatal stab wounds to her neck and throat. Now, during the incident, Nay also allegedly jumped on the bonnet and roof of a Mercedes and was also heard yelling Allahu Akbar. Police have described the witnesses who apprehended the man and held him down until police arrived as heroes.
So the male offender responsible for the stabbing is in custody. All I can conclusively say is that male offender was on his own and there's no other person complicit at this stage. So the threat to the community has been negated. The arrest of the offender happened in very close proximity to where I stand, where a number of members of the public actually physically restrained the offender. And I want to acknowledge those people, those members of the public who got involved. They were brave, and I can only use that word seriously. They were significantly brave people. To approach a person with a mindset of obviously what this person did, with clear evidence of a stabbing previously, these people are heroes. And I want to acknowledge that.
Police said despite indications the assailant shouted Allahu Akbar and shoot me, it wasn't yet clear whether there was a political motive. Australia's 7 News has been told the alleged attacker had absconded from a mental health facility in recent days. In a related news, 3 British men, including former Bury midfielder Paul O'Shaughnessy, pinned down the knife-wielding man who allegedly attempted to stab several more people in Sydney on Tuesday. He played over 70 times for the Shakers from 1998 to 2004. His brother Luke and his friend Lee Cuthbert, all from Manchester, were working in their recruitment company office in the Australian city when they heard shouting in the street and gave chase. Take a listen.
We ran out and we kind of saw some blood on the floor or whatever on the street. So we're like, oh my god, this is pretty serious. And then everyone was on the other side of the road, clearly in distress, saying, and we was like, where's he gone? And he was like, he's run that way, he's run that way. So me and my brother were the fastest out of the traps, and we just like ran in the direction of him, and we were just shouting to people, has he got a knife, has he got a gun, what weapons has he got? And everyone was saying, he's just got a knife, he's wielding a knife. Probably about 300 metres that we chased him for, and by the time we got there, someone else had already kind of like kind of got him, and then my brother came in, and we all came in. We just restrained the guy. We got rid of the weapon, and the weapon was on the side, and that was full of blood. You know, you could see clearly that he didn't have any stab wounds on himself, because his shirt was up and all that kind of stuff. And I didn't see any stab wounds, but there was quite a lot of blood on his hands, so it was a really scary situation.
A telephone scam making the rounds starts with a phone call from someone claiming to be a government investigator who says they have evidence linking you to a crime. Getting educated and taking a few basic steps may well keep you from becoming a victim of this fraud. Eagle News correspondent Thomas I. Likeness talked with a victim of these fraudsters, and let's find out how these criminals operate.
Bob lives in a western Canadian city. Recently, he lost $6,000 to these crooks. Bob agreed to tell Eagle News his story, but he asked us not to reveal his true name. One morning, Bob received a call. He was told that information about him had been found at a crime scene in Ontario in a car that had blood and drugs in it. He was told that several bank accounts had been opened in his name and were used for money laundering and drug trafficking. The caller then asked Bob a series of questions about his banking information. When he questioned the legitimacy of the caller, Bob was told to type in the phone number on his caller ID into Google, which then directed him to what appeared to be a government website. Because Bob had previous problems with identity theft, he decided to follow the directions of these bogus investigators in an attempt to clear his name. He was instructed to go to his bank and withdraw $6,000. He was told that by doing so, police would be able to verify he had nothing to do with the other accounts. Bob was assured the money would be held by the government and returned to him within 15 minutes. Over the course of the next 6 hours, the fake cops directed Bob to buy $4,000 worth of gift cards from various convenience stores. He was told to put the remainder of the cash into a Bitcoin machine. I asked Bob, why didn't you just hang up? Why didn't you ask someone for advice?
They made it very clear that if I told anyone, it could compromise the investigation, so I had to keep silence and just follow their directions.
As the scam played out, Bob says there were 3 people involved.
Well, the first one was the alleged junior officer. They took the information. The second one was the bad cop. His idea was to get you all upset so that you would hang up. And then the third one would call you back, and he was the good cop, the one that you could trust. And of course, that's how they were able to extort the money from me.
At one point, he was warned if he hung up, his bank account would be suspended for 6 months and police would arrest him. When Bob realized he'd been scammed, he went to the bank and then called police. In retrospect, he says he was disappointed the bank did not question his withdrawal of such a large sum of money.
The bank managers were stunned at that it had happened. But what I was really upset about from the bank manager's point of view from the other bank was that they didn't question such a big transaction, considering the fact I've never taken out that kind of money out of my account ever. So
Bob added one convenience store clerk did question his purchase of the gift cards.
There was one staff member who did, and I wish I had listened to her, but again, at the time they even gave me a script of what to say to them if I was asked any questions. She just said, "Are you sure that this is not a scam?" And I just said, "No, they're for my little brother." And that was what the script was.
Many people who have been conned out of money feel so ashamed they won't even file a police report. But Bob says he wants people to know his story.
It's just because I don't want to see anybody else fall victim to this. I'm a Christian myself, so knowing that that this happened to me, I just don't want it to happen to anybody else. So if we can get as much education out there as to what's going on, and hopefully like the banking institutions and the law enforcement can get involved as well, it would be a great help, in that maybe we can at least deter or even stop these thieves from doing what they're doing.
He says banks could do a lot to stop this kind of fraud.
Well, if you really want to make it difficult for them, I think the banks would be the best option, because people will still answer their phone regardless, and people will still listen to these people. But if the banks are well informed and can even, deter these thieves by either posting it straight on the windows, or when these people are pulling out that kind of sum of money and it seems like they're agitated, maybe ask questions, or even better yet, have a sign saying that if you're being harassed over the phone, this is a scam, hang up. We'll call the police.
Police and government agencies say they will never ask you for money to clear your name. If they do want to talk to you, they'll call you and make arrangements to meet in person, probably in a government office or at the police station. If you should get a suspicious phone call and you don't recognize the number, let it go to voicemail. If you do answer it and you're still suspicious, just hang up. In Edmonton, Thomas I. Likeness, Eagle News, I'm one with 25.
Thank you, Thomas I. Likeness from our EBC Canada Bureau. And we'll be back with more news right after this break. Stay tuned.
Sa gitna ng dilim, ako ang mata sa sahing papawid. Ako ang dilat sa tuwing ang bayan ko ay tulog ng mahimbing. Ang aming buhay, handang ialay para sa bayan. Kayo'y handang maglingkuran.
Join us in celebrating the 72nd anniversary of the Philippine Air Force.
Landmarks, Linggo, alas 6 hanggang alas 7 ng gabi.
Welcome back. The administration of U.S. President Donald Trump announced new rules that aim to deny permanent residency and citizenship benefits to migrants who receive food stamps, Medicaid, and other public welfare. Migrants will be blocked from entering the country if they're likely to need public assistance, and those already here, or there rather, will not be able to obtain green cards or U.S. citizenship. Here's how Acting U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services Director Ken Cuccinelli framed it.
Since 1996, the law has required foreign nationals to rely on their own capabilities and the resources of their families, sponsors, and private organizations in their communities to succeed. However, Congress has never defined the term public charge in the law, and that term hadn't been clearly defined by regulation. Well, that is what changes today with this rule. Through the public charge rule, President Trump's administration is reinforcing the ideals of self-sufficiency and personal responsibility, ensuring that immigrants are able to support themselves and become successful here in America. Our rule generally prevents aliens who are likely to become a public charge from coming to the United States or remaining here and getting a green card. Public charge is now defined in a way that ensures the law is meaningfully enforced and that those who are subject to it are self-sufficient. Under the rule, a public charge is now defined as an individual who receives one or more designated public benefits for more than 12 months in the aggregate within any 36-month period. For instance, receipt of 2 different benefits in 1 month counts as 2 months. A public charge and admissibility determination is prospective and looks at whether an individual is likely at any point in the future to become a public charge as we define it in the regulation. Public benefits are defined as federal, state, and local, as well as tribal, cash assistance for income maintenance, and a small list of non-cash benefits. Some examples of the public benefits that are part of the rule are general assistance, SSI, SNAP, most forms of Medicaid, and certain subsidized housing programs. Significantly, the rule does not consider many forms of government assistance that protect children and pregnant women's health as public benefits. Generally, this includes emergency medical assistance, disaster relief, national school lunch programs, WIC, CHIP, Medicaid received by people under the age of 21 or pregnant women, as well as foster care and adoption subsidies, student and mortgage loans, energy assistance, food pantries, homeless shelters, and Head Start. It's important to note this rule will apply prospectively only to applications and petitions received starting on October 15th of this year. Once this rule is implemented and effective on October 15th, USCIS Career Immigration Services officers, what we call ISOs, will generally consider an alien's current and past receipt of the designated public benefits while in the United States as a negative factor when examining applications. However, receipt of certain non-cash benefits received before October 15th will not be considered as a negative factor. The underlying statute, passed on a bipartisan basis, also requires officers to assess, at a minimum, each applicant's age, health, family status, assets, resources and financial status, and their education and skills, as well as other factors set forth in the rule in the totality of the circumstances. The totality of the circumstances means that officers will assess all of the evidence related to these factors, and no one factor alone will decide an applicant's case. Most of these factors are the ones Congress mandated us to review when considering immigration benefit applications. Under this final rule, USCIS will be able to objectively determine whether an applicant is likely at any time in the future to receive public benefits above the designated threshold. Importantly, this final rule has no impact on humanitarian-based immigration programs for refugees and asylees. No impact on refugees or asylees. And it clarifies the exemption for trafficking victims and victims of domestic violence. Congress has long carved out exemptions for these categories, and our regulation adheres strictly to the laws as written. The final rule also excludes from consideration public benefits received by certain members of the U.S. Armed Forces and their spouses and children, as well as Medicaid benefits for emergency medical services. Lastly, under the final rule, USCIS can permit an applicant seeking a green card from inside the United States who's inadmissible only on the public charge ground to adjust their status to that of a legal permanent resident if they will post a public charge bond.
The National Immigration Law Center, meanwhile, tweeted that the rule is a race-motivated wealth test and said, "We will fight back." Xavier Becerra, the Attorney General of California, called the rule vile in a tweet and said it is an attack on families and lower-income communities of color and threatened to take legal action to protect the rights of all Californians. Meanwhile, Doug Rand, co-founder of The Boundless, a pro-migrant group that helps families navigate the U.S. immigration system, said the new standards would apply to non-citizen residents who use public services repeatedly after October 15, 2019. The services that count against an applicant include federal, state, and local cash and income assistance, food stamps from the federal SNAP program, Medicaid, and subsidized housing. Cuccinelli stressed that the new rules did not apply to public assistance programs for children or pregnant women or emergency room care. The changes to the public charge rules in the U.S. immigration system generally have been in the works since 2018 as part of President Trump's campaign to slash both legal and illegal immigration. In May, President Trump announced a broad plan for immigration that protects American wages, promotes American values, and attracts the best and brightest from all around the world.
We cherish the open door that we want to create for our country, but a big proportion of those immigrants must come in through merit and skill. The White House plan makes no change to the number of green cards allocated each year, but instead of admitting people through random chance, we will establish simple, universal criteria for admission to the United States. To promote integration, assimilation, and national unity, future immigrants will be required to learn English and to pass a civics exam prior to admission. Newcomers compete for jobs months.
And staying in the U.S., Attorney General Bill Barr pledged to pursue any co-conspirators of accused sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein, saying there were serious irregularities at the jail where the disgraced financier died of an apparent suicide. Barr's comments came as FBI agents reportedly raided Epstein's private Caribbean island 2 days after the convicted pedophile was found dead in his cell while awaiting trial on federal charges he trafficked underage girls for sex. Barr, who heads the government's Justice Department and oversees federal prisons, said he was appalled and angry to learn of the New York Metropolitan Correctional Center's failure to adequately secure the jail.
I was appalled, and indeed the whole department was, and frankly, angry to learn of the MCC's failure to adequately secure this prisoner. We are now learning of serious irregularities at this facility that are deeply concerning and demand a thorough investigation. But let me assure you that this case will continue on against anyone who was complicit with Epstein. Any co-conspirators should not rest easy. The victims deserve justice, and they will get it.
The FBI is investigating how Epstein, 66, was able to take his own life in a high-security facility just weeks after he was found unconscious with marks on his neck following an earlier reported suicide attempt. He was also housed alone after officials decided to remove his cellmate. Now, both of those factors violated standard procedure for any inmate who comes off suicide watch, which Epstein had less than 2 weeks ago. Both the FBI and the Department of Justice have launched their own investigations. Epstein's death came a day after a court released documents in which one of his alleged victims said she was forced to have sex with well-known American political and business personalities. A 24-year-old man who purchased body armor and rifle parts for the gunman who killed 9 people in Dayton, Ohio, has been arrested on firearms charges, according to officials. Ethan Colley was charged with lying about his drug use in order to buy a gun, but was not charged with direct involvement in the August 4 mass shooting in Dayton by his friend Connor Betts, also 24. Benjamin Glassman, U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Ohio, said Colley was charged with making a false statement about his use of illegal drugs in order to buy himself a Draco pistol. In the criminal complaint against Colley, FBI agents said he had also admitted buying body armor, a part for an AR-15 .15 rifle and a 100-round magazine for Betts and stored the items at his apartment. The FBI said Betts retrieved the items about 6 to 8 weeks ago, and Betts was shot dead by police after killing 9 people in downtown Dayton, including his 22-year-old sister, in the early hours of August 4. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump said Friday that fellow Republicans will set aside resistance to restricting access to firearms by supporting background checks for people buying weapons in the wake of mass shootings in Ohio and Texas. The process in efforts to curb the United States' freewheeling relationship with firearms came despite talks between President Trump and the head of the fierce NRA gun lobby, Wayne LaPierre. Republicans have long resisted imposing background checks on gun buyers, a measure that the powerful NRA argues would be the thin end of the wedge, leading to ever tighter restrictions on the constitutional right to carrying weapons. But after 31 people were shot dead in El Paso, Texas and Dayton, Ohio last weekend, just the latest in an ever-growing list of bloodbaths carried out by men with powerful rifles, political momentum has apparently shifted. President Trump said that Republican Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell was totally on board with background checks.
I spoke to Mitch McConnell yesterday. He's totally on board. He said, I've been waiting for your call. He is totally on board. I spoke to senators that in some cases, friends of mine, but pretty hardline senators, hardline, and when I say that in a positive way, hardline on the Second Amendment. And they understand we don't want insane people, mentally ill people, bad people, dangerous people. We don't want guns in the hands of the wrong people. I think a lot of really meaningful things on background checks will take place, including red flags, including a lot of other very, very important items. And the Republicans are looking at it very seriously, and I really believe that the NRA, I've spoken to them numerous times, they're really good people. They're great patriots. They love our country. They love our country so much, and frankly, I really think they're going to get there also.
To the White House, and what would be worldwide for him on how to...
The Kremlin on Tuesday defended the police response to recent protests in Moscow and downplayed the huge demonstrations. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said, I quote, "We believe the firm action of law enforcement to curb public unrest was absolutely justified." He said, "We do not agree with those who call what is happening a political crisis." Since mid-July, tens of thousands of people have taken to the streets of Moscow demanding free elections after the exclusion of several opposition figures from local polls next month. Police detained hundreds after a huge rally on Saturday and nearly 1,400 at a protest late last month. Some protesters were injured in the crackdown. Peskov said law enforcement agencies are fulfilling their duties and do everything necessary to ensure security during sanctioned rallies. The protests are among the largest since a wave of demonstrations in 2011 and 2012 when President Vladimir Putin returned to his presidency after serving a term as prime minister. President Putin has not commented on the Moscow protests. Peskov said President Putin has paid attention to what is happening but has not commented because every day in Russia a huge number of events take place. Meanwhile, scientists were a step closer to an effective treatment for Ebola after 2 drugs in a clinical trial were found to significantly boost survival rates, according to the U.S. Health Authority co-founding the research. The study began last November in the Democratic Republic of Congo, but its current phase has been halted and all future patients switched over to the treatments that have shown positive results, according to the U.S. National Institutes of Health in a statement. The drugs named REGN-EB3 and MAB-114 are monoclonal antibodies that bind to glycoprotein on the Ebola virus and then neutralize its ability to infect other cells. Anthony Fauci, director of the NIH's National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, said REGN-EB3 and MAB-114 are the first drugs that, in a scientifically sound study, have clearly shown a significant diminution of mortality for people with Ebola virus disease. Vast swaths of southeastern Myanmar lie under floodwaters that have already forced tens of thousands to flee their homes as the death toll from the massive landslide hit 59, according to firefighters. Seasonal monsoon rains batter the country every year, but the recent deluge has submerged entire communities, with AFP drone footage showing only the tops of houses visible. There are currently more than 80,000 people sheltering at evacuation sites across the country, according to the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, or OCHA. In the town of Ye in Mon State, people scrambled to stay afloat as they tried to swim to safety through swirling muddy waters. Meanwhile, others fled to rooftops or to higher grounds, calling out to rescue boats for help. Many states in Myanmar have been affected by the floods, but Mon appears to have been the most badly hit. Vice President Henry Van Thuy visited the area on Monday and pledged that more boats would be deployed in rescue efforts. Climate scientists in 2015 ranked Myanmar at the top of a global list of nations hardest hit by extreme weather. That year, more than 100 people died in floods that also displaced hundreds of thousands. Meanwhile, the death toll from Typhoon Lakima rose to 49 on Tuesday, and 21 were still missing after the monster storm wreaked havoc on China's eastern coast, causing huge damage with strong gales and torrential rain. Lakima hit the three Chinese provinces of Zhejiang, Shandong, and Anhui over the weekend, and it forced more than 1 million residents to flee. China's official news agency Xinhua said late Monday that at least 49 people are dead. Dozens more are still missing. Lakima made landfall in Zhejiang province on Saturday, which bore the brunt of the damage after the storm hit with winds of nearly 190 kilometers per hour, and it pounded the coast with waves several meters in height. Xinhua said the rainfall recorded this weekend in Shandong province was the largest since records began in 1952. A body was found on Tuesday in the hunt for a Franco-Irish teen in Malaysia, with a charity saying it is likely the missing girl 10 days after she disappeared from a rainforest resort. Nora Quarin, 15 years old, went missing on August 4, a day after checking into the resort with her London-based family. They suspected she was abducted, but Malaysian police classified it as a missing person case. More than 350 people were deployed to hunt through dense jungle next to the Dusun resort, not far from Kuala Lumpur, backed by helicopters, drones, sniffer dogs, and divers, shamans, in an effort to locate her, while the investigation was assisted by police from Britain, Ireland, and France. Mohammed Mat Yusof Negeri, Sembilan State Police Chief, told reporters that the body of a white female was found just before 2 p.m. local time after authorities received a report from a member of the public. It was found 2 kilometers from the Dusun resort where she was staying. The body is intact, he said, and he said the body had not been identified. But the Lucy Blackman Trust, a UK charity that supports the families of British people missing overseas, said that, quote, it sadly seems likely to be the teen. The discovery came a day after her family offered a 50,000 ringgit or $11,900 reward donated by a Belfast business for information that could lead to her return. Now, her family said it would be extremely unusual for the reserved youngster to have wandered off on her own. She has a condition called holoprosencephaly, which means she has a smaller than normal brain and has limited verbal communication and cannot write more than a few words. She attended a school for young people with learning and communication difficulties. While officially treating it as a missing person case, as earlier said, police did not rule out other possibilities. An open window was found in the cottage where the family was staying at the resort. Police have questioned a number of people and are examining fingerprints found on a window, and they're looking into reports that villagers heard a truck early on the morning that the girl disappeared. And the news continues here on Eagle News International. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. An official of the Department of Finance forecasts inflation to decelerate to as much as 1.2% this year if monthly inflation expands by 0.3 percentage points until the rest of the year. In an economic bulletin, Finance Undersecretary Hale Beltran noted that month-on-month inflation rose by 0.25% last July. Data from the Philippine Statistics Authority showed that rate of price increases expanded by 2.4% year-on-year last July from the previous month's 2.7%. A year ago, inflation rate is 5.7%, while year-to-date inflation stood at 3.3% within the government's 2 to 4% target band. Core inflation, which excludes volatile food and oil items, rose 3.2% from month ago's 3.3%, resulting to a 3.6 average. Year-ago figure is 4.5%. Beltran said big drop on food inflation caused a slower inflation rate last July, a turnaround from last year's inflation environment when food inflation resulted to big jumps in inflation rate, which saw its peak in September to October at 6.7%. He also said the latest inflation outturn saw a within target inflation outturn. Meanwhile, stock markets retreated Tuesday as rising tensions in Hong Kong and an economic crisis in Argentina added to persistent uncertainty over U.S.-China trade talks and political strains elsewhere. Stocks are in the red as a series of factors continue to weigh on global sentiment, noted David Madden, an analyst at trading group of CMC Markets UK. He said the U.S.-China trade standoff, aggressive easing from some central banks, worries about a no-deal Brexit, chatter that Germany is heading towards a recession, political uncertainty in Italy, the financial meltdown in Argentina, and of course the tensions in Hong Kong are all contributing to the poor economic climate. Hong Kong airport authorities on Tuesday suspended all check-ins as pro-democracy protesters blocked the facility. The decision came after thousands of demonstrators flooded into the airport for the second day running and blocked passengers from reaching entrances to the departure area in both terminals. Hong Kong's main shares index finished down more than 2% Tuesday, while Shanghai lost 0.6%. Tokyo retreated more than 1% as exporters were hit by a rush into the yen, seen as a safe haven investment. Gold, meanwhile, seen also as a safe bet, continued to push above $1,500 an ounce. Oil prices steadied. In other business news, India's passenger car sales shrank for the 9th month in a row, falling 31% in July, according to industry data released on Tuesday. Hit by a consumption slowdown, the fall in car sales has triggered job losses, forced factories to temporarily halt production, and it led to the closure of many dealerships. The sale of motorcycles and scooters has also slumped, dipping 19% in July compared to a year earlier, according to data released by the Society of Indian Automobile Manufacturers, or SIAM. The downturn in India's auto sector, which contributes about 7.5% of India's GDP, poses a serious threat to Prime Minister Narendra Modi as his government attempts to fix a slowing economy and reverse a 45-year low unemployment rate. And for sports news, here's Ben Bernaldez.
Kyle Lowry of the NBA champion Toronto Raptors has withdrawn from consideration for the U.S. Basketball World Cup team due to a thumb injury. The Raptors guard had surgery on his left thumb in July and had hoped to recover and play for the United States in their bid to win a third straight World Cup title in China. U.S. coach Greg Popovich is also awaiting word on the fitness of Boston Celtics guard Marcus Smart, who missed the inter-squad exhibition game in Las Vegas on Friday with tightness in his calf. The United States squad is to resume training in California this week with an exhibition game scheduled against Spain on Friday in Anaheim. The Americans will fly to Australia the following day, where they are scheduled to play 2 friendlies against the Aussies and 1 against Canada before the World Cup starts on August 31st. The United States will be without a host of top NBA talent in China. LeBron James said in April that he would not be available, and more recently, NBA stars including James Harden, Anthony Davis, and Kawhi Leonard have opted out of the U.S. squad, preferring to prepare for the NBA season. In tennis, U.S. and Australian Open champion Naomi Osaka returned to the world #1 spot in the WTA rankings on Monday. The 21-year-old lost to Serena Williams in the quarterfinals of last week's Rogers Cup, but benefited from the second-round defeat of former #1 Ashley Barty and the failure of Karolina Pliskova to reach the semis in Toronto. Osaka first hit top spot in January after winning back-to-back majors in New York and Melbourne, making history as the first Japanese player to achieve it. After 7 weeks on top, Barty slips to second with Pliskova in third. The only other movement in the top 10 sees Williams finalists in Toronto climbing 2 places to 8, with Sloane Stephens going in the other direction. Canadian Bianca Andreescu, who won the Rogers Cup following Williams' withdrawal with back spasm in the opening set of the final, climbs 13 places to 14. Meanwhile, Rafael Nadal completed a 6-3, 6-0 demolition of Russian Daniil Medvedev to win in Montreal on Sunday and extend his record haul of Masters 1,000 titles. The world #2 secured his 35th Masters crown, pulling clear by 2 in that category from Novak Djokovic, who has won 33 of the elite tournaments. Clay court king Nadal successfully defended a hard court title for the first time in his career. Nadal, in contrast, had played just 3 hard court matches since starting his build-up to the US Open this week, reaching the final on a walkover when injured Gael Monfils pulled out of their scheduled semi-final. With all that going for him, Nadal needed just 70 minutes to subdue Medvedev, breaking the Russian 4 times. Hours later, Nadal said he would skip the Cincinnati Masters starting on Monday, where he was seated second behind Djokovic and ahead of Roger Federer. The top seed, who now owns 5 Canadian titles dating to 2005, swept the last 7 games in the hardcore blowout against 23-year-old Russian opponent, who had never played Nadal before. Despite the lopsided defeat, Medvedev was pleased with his time in Toronto. For Nadal, it was a 3rd title of 2019 after clay court success at Rome and the French Open. And these are the stories for EN Sports. I'm Ben Bernaldez and I'm 1 with 25.
And in Florida, Major League Soccer joins members of the community for an afternoon of fun activities. Eliza Sanchez reports.
Today, Neptune Middle School is hosting a community MLS day for families around the area to have fun in the sun.
Love it. Basically, it's like for the kids in the community to get together, and of course, MLS, you know, Major League Soccer, and if you like soccer, you're in the right spot. Yes.
The Major League Soccer Association collaborated with Target to create a field day for families and kids of all ages.
You know, I think it's important to showcase the partnership and to, really drum up excitement and activity within the community. So we're really excited to be here as part of Target and working with some talent from the MLS world to create buzz and awareness for the All-Star game to come.
It's perfect for right before the kids go back to school. You know, we don't want to pull the kids out of school. Well, they have a great field day while they're on summer break.
Even in the midst of the afternoon heat, freestylers kick it with the audience, all while teaching them some new tricks. Participants like Ileana, Nasir, McDino, and his little brother Moses share with us their experience with the event and their increased love for soccer.
Oh, it's great. As soon as we pulled up to the site, we were super impressed with everything that they had already planned out. This is really cool. There's like a huge boombox with a DJ on top, and the freestylers have been here kicking it, entertaining. I like all the giveaways and like the refreshment centers because it's really hot out here.
Learning new tricks and scoring. When I was at my school over here, they were talking about soccer. Then I wanted to join. When I score, I like to celebrate.
Hitting the target, I made a lot of friends.
Doing the drills, it helps them to get better at soccer, like doing soccer practice, and it shows them how to have fun and stuff like that.
Reporting to you from the Community MLS Day here in Orlando, Florida, I am Elida Sanchez and I am 1 with 25.
Thank you, Elida Sanchez from our EBC Florida Bureau. And that's it for tonight's broadcast. For everyone here on Eagle News, I'm Alma Angeles, always 1 with 25. Good night.